Today we're going to talk about indie publishing. Let's have a hot takes discussion about why I don't think indie authors are judged fairly. Before we get into why I think indie authors are judged unfairly, I want to first give a background about me real quick. I am an indie author. I wrote a book. It's right here. I don't like to show it off too much on the channel because the channel isn't necessarily about me, but it's The Trials of Ashmount. It's a grimdark fantasy, and I published it half a year ago, June 1st, 2022. So that's me. I am an indie author. But mostly I want to talk about my experiences as a reader. Obviously, as a author myself, it's very easy to say, yes, we're judged unfairly. But that's not the angle I'm actually taking this video from. I'm coming at it as someone, before I even published, someone that's read books. Someone that knew the stigmas attached, and I've read books that were both good and bad in the self-publishing community. So first, let's talk about the stigma. Indie or self-publishing has a really bad reputation. Fortunately, it's been kind of coming around the last few years, and people aren't as disrespectful as they might have been previously. The problem with self-publishing is that it's all up to the individual who's publishing the book. So you could have a person who goes on their computer, types up just a single draft of a book, and publishes it. And the problem with that is that is happening quite often. And then you dilute this self-publishing community with a lot of unedited crap, frankly. And it sucks to say that, but there is a lot of that does end up happening, unfortunately. And the sad thing is that really brings down the community as a whole. But there's then a whole lot of people who do the same thing, but they put a lot of effort into it. And they pay for editing and invest in their book, and they make a product that is competent and competitive to traditional publishing, I would say. But here's the problem. As soon as somebody says a book is self-published, whether you're a fan of self-publishing or not, I think that you're going to still have in the back of your head, unless you have been converted completely to being 100% self-published fan and not necessarily liking traditional publishing anymore. I do know there's a small subsect of people who really don't like traditional publishing anymore, and so they just focus on indie publishing. And that's cool, but mainly I'm talking about people who still enjoy traditional and indie. And this is pretty much everything I'm going to say is actually first-hand experience stuff, things that I experience even still today. Even though I understand that I'm doing it, it's something I have to actively combat, right? And there's still more improvements that I can make, but let's talk about this for a second. So someone says, hey, I wrote a book and I'm a self-published author. Automatically, my head, and this, I don't know where this came from because I have to be honest, I haven't known about self-publishing for a very long time. When it first started, way back, I think that was in the early 2000s, I remember hearing rumors of it and how people used to laugh and really talk down on it because, for one, there just wasn't the resources to make a really competitive book to traditional publishing, I don't think. And for two, the reputation just really started out being like, oh, you couldn't get traditionally published, and so you had to self-publish. And that's still kind of a reputation today, but I think a lot of people now have realized that self-publishing is actually lucrative enough where people are choosing to go that route instead of traditional publishing. So there's been a bit more acceptance with self-publishing in that regard. So you hear a book is self-published, and you just have this immediate knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, it sounded so cool, but it's self-published. It's going to be not as good as I think that it could be, right? I mean, this is hard to admit, but it is a thought that I have. And when I read a self-published book, and I write a review, and I haven't done too many of these, mostly I just haven't read a ton of self-published stuff. I'm trying to get better, but I also am super far behind on a lot of like traditionally published books that I want to read too. So I keep trying to mix and match my readings to fit that in. So for example, right now I'm embarking on my Robin Hobb journey. I am currently reading Ship of Destiny, which does not seem to be picked up on them. There we go. I'm getting pretty far into it. Well, I'm that far into it, but it's great so far. I thought I had them near, but I had to go get them. But so after I finish the Robin Hobb book, I will be moving on to reading. This is not going to be a good cover for the webcam. Duckett and Dyer. This is book 2. I read the first one. I enjoyed it. So I got the second book, and then I think I'll also end up reading this trilogy by T.A. Bruno. The first book is In the Orbit of Sirens. Also self-published, but man, this book particularly, I don't know what it is about the hardcover and the interior layout and just the way it, I don't know, it just has this feel to it, and I'm like, it feels like a super traditionally published book, and I don't know why. And honestly, so does the Duckett and Dyer book. I wonder if it's just the size of the hardcover. I don't know. I mean, I have my own hardcover book. I guess really the self-published hardcovers, I think in general, just feel good. There's something about the self-published paperbacks. It's kind of a tangent, but there's something about the self-published paperbacks that kind of just don't feel. They just feel different, and I don't know why that is. I think it's the paper they use. But anyway, enough about what makes a self-published book different physically than traditionally. My point is that when I hear a book is self-published, I immediately have this reaction. This and I try and curb it. I try and ignore it. But it no matter whose book it is, no matter what it is, the second I hear it, I'm like, oh man, it's I'll probably like it. But will I like it as much as a traditionally published book? And it's just, I think the root cause of this reaction is that I've been in writing groups before, and a lot of people advertise their books there, and I don't like to be negative, but a lot of those books that were getting advertised, I would read like excerpts of or look inside, and it was just like, ugh, it wasn't great. Now again, there are many self-published authors who have fantastic books, and I haven't read a ton of self-published books, but from the ones I've read, there's some good ones out there. I think it's just that you get into the writing community and you see all of this, like, you see good and bad writing, obviously, but when you see the bad, it kind of sticks with you more, maybe. And so I'll read an indie book, and I'll go to review it, and I'll be like, man, this was really good, and then maybe I'll include an editing issue that I saw. I'm like, man, this is really good, but there was a lot of issues with this specific editing flaw, maybe. And I say flaw, but the reality is there aren't really rules in writing. There are rules, but like you can break those rules, and almost every single traditionally published author does, right? So one thing that the indie writing community always puts forward are, there's really a couple, right? Show don't tell is a rule that everyone always talks about. Another one is adverbs. The indie writing community hates adverbs. And when I wrote my book, I I basically don't use adverbs on purpose because of how much it gets kind of lambasted in the community. And it's ironic because you can read something that's like a master book, right? Robin Hobb is considered a master storyteller. And there are an insane amount of adverbs in this book. And I notice it only because I have this background in the indie writing community where it's one of the biggest things that people will really criticize you on. And it's just funny because when you read a traditionally published book, adverbs are used all the time. Traditionally published authors tell you things all the time. They don't show things, they tell all the time. And that's another thing that people get lambasted on. Wow, I really wanted to like your book, but you just were telling way too much. And it's like, really? Because that happens all the time in all the famous books that everyone loves. And it's funny because, it's not funny, because it's unfair. But it is ironic because, you have all these famous, Game of Thrones, Robin Hobb, the Realm of the Elderlings, The First Law. All of these books are so well known, but they all break the rules that everyone says not to use. I think another one that's really popular is the argument with dialogue tags. So some people say that you should only use said and asked. I kind of, for the most part, with the very rare exception, I follow that same piece of advice. But all of these traditionally published authors, a lot of them, they use other words all the time. This person murmured. This person said testily. You see this all the time. And so it's just funny because when I go to review a traditionally published book, I don't usually bring up editing. I don't say, wow, this book has a lot of adverbs, right? And I just started realizing this seems unfair because I will criticize a book for having issues that if it's self-published, I'll say, listen, this could have been improved if these issues didn't exist. But the same issues in a traditionally published book don't come up in the review. Does that make me a hypocrite? Yes. Yes, it certainly does. Does that make you a hypocrite? Maybe, because I know a lot of people do the same thing. And it's just something I thought I would talk about because I realized it the other night when I was like, wow, all these issues, I'm saying issues. They're not an actual issue because Robin Hobb is a fantastic author. But these are all things I've noticed in the book. And I'm like, wow, if I was reviewing this and it was an independently published book, I would be bringing these issues up in my reviews. But I don't. Why? And I think that the reason for that, I think, is because when a book is traditionally published, it's been like accepted by the process, right? So you have to get an agent. That's the first step. And then when an agent decides, like, wow, you're worth it, I'm going to actually try and land you a contract. Then you have to get accepted by a publisher. So that's two times that you have to get accepted by a very limited process. Once you get accepted, they have the backing of huge companies to do things like pay for your editing from professionals who have been in this job for a very long time. Now, there are indie focused editors and professionals who do all these other things. But the problem with that is that there's a lot of editors out there who either don't have the experience or I could just say I'm an editor now and I'm taking clients. And I don't have to list any credentials. And who knows, you might pay me and then you will be like, wow, this was not what I needed. So when you get traditionally published, you have these proven professionals who are going to be working on your book, and you don't really necessarily have to worry about it. Now, some people will bring up, well, this author is so big that you can tell that no one edited this book. And I think that's just them being mean to criticize the author, because let's face it, for the most part, they're editing books. Are there exceptions? Probably. But that's kind of a different story to talk about, I guess. But in indie publishing, it's unfair, because I think that we hear independently published, we hear self-published, and then we're looking at it with a more critical eye, or at least I am, and I think some of you are too, because it's just this bias that pops up that I don't think we were really necessarily aware of. At least I wasn't, and this is kind of a big eye-opener / discovery thing that I really just, a light bulb went off in my head the other night, and I was like, oh my god, I need to try and stop that. I need to try and judge books fairly, no matter if they're traditionally published or self-published. I need to be less hard on self-published work because of editing, and I need to maybe be a little bit more harder on traditionally published books or editing, and kind of merge these opinions into like one medium. It's just something I thought about, something I've figured I'd bring up. I'm curious if anybody here has the same concerns, the same eye-opening realization that, wow, I actually have been biased. And if not, that's cool too. I'd like to hear in the comments down below what you guys think of my revelation, what you guys maybe have discovered, or maybe you discovered this long ago, or perhaps you disagree and you think maybe the independently published authors should be scrutinized more. I'd like to hear what you think. If you like this video, consider subscribing, and we'll see you in the next one, I guess. Thank you.